Spooky time, PACC Fireside Tales. Tonight we have Spooky Campfire Tales. We will be reading the 50-cent piece. The young couple departed much later than they expected from their cousin's house. They were still miles from home when dusk fell over the narrow, windy road they traveled. The horses were tired, the night was chilly, and there was no inn anywhere in sight. The husband clicked his tongue thoughtfully, a sure sign that he was getting worried. His young wife laid a hand on his arm and suggested they seek out a house and ask for shelter for the night. Her husband considered this proposal for a moment, then smiled, and as they traveled the long, bumpy road that led from Massachusetts to New York, they started watching for a house. It was the husband who spied a light through the trees just when his wife had resigned herself to a cold night spent in a parked carriage. He turned their horse onto a narrow dirt road leading up the hill. A pleasant little house stood at the crest. The light was shining cheerfully from the windows, illuminating a pretty, well-kept yard. Their carriage was spotted as they drove up the hill, and an old man and his wife met the couple at the door. The old folks were in night clothes and had obviously been about to go to bed, but their welcome was warm. The elderly couple introduced themselves as Mr. and Mrs. Brown. The old wife took the young woman by the arm, cutting briskly over her cold hands. "You'll catch your death out in this cold, damp air," Mrs. Brown exclaimed. "Papa, throw some more wood on the fire." She whisked the young folks inside the cozy house and settled them into comfortable chairs close to the fireplace before the young husband could explain the reason for their unexpected visit. As old man Brown built up the fire, the young man asked if they might rent a room for the night, since there was no inn nearby and they were still many miles from home. "Rent? Don't be ridiculous," exclaimed Mr. Brown. "You must be our guests." She ignored the young couple's protests and bustled out of the room to get them some hot food. Feeling overwhelmed by such kindness, the young man and his pretty wife supped up on the good meat and cakes placed before them and chatted merrily with their host and his wife. After the impromptu dinner, old man Brown and his wife escorted the weary couple to their room. As they parted for the night, the young husband once again volunteered to pay for their lodgings. Mrs. Brown stiffened and shook her head reproachfully at the young man, and her husband said, "Nay, lad, 'tis but a small service we offer you. Keep your money and buy something pretty for your young lady." The travelers woke early and tiptoed out of the cozy house. The young husband hesitated a moment and then left a shiny 50-cent coin in the center of the kitchen table where the old couple could not miss it. Then he hitched up their horse and they went on their way. After several miles, they came to Spiegelton in New York. Spotting an inn, they went inside and purchased breakfast. The innkeeper was a jolly fellow who came over to talk to them as they ate. When the husband mentioned the nice old couple who had given them lodging the previous night, the innkeeper turned pale. "Where did you say the house was?" the innkeeper asked. The husband described the location in detail. "You must be mistaken," said the innkeeper. "I know that place. That house was destroyed 3 years ago in a fire that killed the entire Brown family." "I don't believe it," the husband said flatly. "Mr. and Mrs. Brown were alive and well last night." After debating the matter for a few minutes, the couple and the innkeeper drove the carriage back out town toward the old Brown place. The ground was quickly covered in bright sunshine, and the wife soon recognized the place where they had turned off the main road the night before. To her surprise, the narrow lane was overgrown with weeds, and dead branches crackled under the carriage wheels as they turned into it. She glanced uneasily at her husband and saw that he was equally disturbed. The track had not looked this way when they left earlier that morning. The carriage climbed a hill to the crest, and as they entered the yard, they saw a burned-out shell of a house, but obviously not sheltered anyone for a long time. "This cannot be right," the wife exclaimed. Climbing down out of the carriage and walking toward the blackened ruin, "This is the Brown place," the innkeeper said. "This is not where we stayed last evening," the husband insisted, slipping through the driver's seat to join the innkeeper on the ground. "I must have mistaken the direction." And the wife gave a terrified scream and swayed. Her husband leapt forward and caught her in his arms as she crumbled to the ground in a dead faint. Searching for the cause of her fright, the husband looked into the ruins and saw a burnt table with a shiny 50-cent piece lying in the center, just where he had left it. next story will be Ghost Handprints. My wife, Jill, and I were driving home from a friend's party late one evening in early May. It was a beautiful night with a full moon. We were laughing and discussing the party when the engine started to cough and the emergency light went on. We had just reached the railroad crossing where, according to local legend, a school bus full of children had stalled on the tracks right in front of an oncoming freight train. Everyone on board the bus had been killed, and the ghosts of the children reported to haunt the intersection, protecting people from danger. Not wanting a repeat of the train crash, I hit the gas pedal trying to get our car safely across the tracks before it broke down completely. But the dad-blamed car wouldn't cooperate, stalled in the dead center of the railroad tracks. Suddenly, the railroad signal started flashing, and a bright light appeared a little way down the track, bearing down on our car. I turned the key and hit the gas pedal again, trying to get the car started. "Hurry up, Jim. The train's coming," my wife began to yell. I immediately broke out into a sweat and tried the engine again. Nothing. "We have to get out," I yelled to Jill, reaching for the door handle. "I can't," she shouted desperately. She was struggling with her seatbelt. We'd been having trouble with it recently. She'd been stuck more than once, and I had to help her get it undone. I threw myself across the stick shift and fought with a reluctant seatbelt. My hands were shaking, and sweat poured down my body. As I felt the rumble of the approaching train, it had seen us and was whistling sharply. I risked a quick glance over my shoulder. The engineer was trying to slow down, but he was too close to stop before he hit us. I redoubled my efforts. Suddenly, the car was given a sharp shove from behind. Jill and I both gasped. I fell into her lap as the car started to roll forward slowly at first, then gaining speed. The back end cleared the tracks just a second before the train roared past. As the car rolled to a stop on the far side of the tracks, the engineer stuck his head out the window of the engine and waved a fist, doubtless shouting something nasty at us for scaring him. That was close," Jill gasped as I struggled upright. "How did you get the car moving?" "I didn't," I said. "Someone must have helped us." I jumped out of the door on the driver's side, ran back to the tracks to thank our rescuer. In the bright moonlight, I searched the area, looking for the person who had just pushed our car out of the path of the train. There was no one there. I called out several times, but no one answered. After a few minutes, struggled with her seatbelt, Jill finally freed herself and joined me. "Where is he?" she asked. "There's no one here," I replied, puzzled. "Maybe he's just shy about being thanked," Jill said. She raised her voice. "Thank you, whoever you are," she called. The wind picked up a little, swirling around us, patting our hair and shoulders like the soft touch of a child's hand. I shivered and hugged my wife tightly to me. We'd almost died tonight, and I was grateful to be alive. "Yes, thank you," I repeated loudly to our mystery rescuer. So we turned back to our stalled vehicle. I pulled out my cell phone, ready to call for a tow truck. Beside me, Jill stopped suddenly, staring at the back of our car. "Jim, look," she gasped. I stared at our vehicle. Scattered in several places across the back of our car were glowing handprints. They were small handprints, the kind that adorn the walls of elementary schools all over the country. I started shaking as I realized the truth. Our car had been pushed off the tracks by the ghosts of the school children killed at this very location. The wind swept around us again, and I thought I heard an echo of childish voices whispering, "You're welcome." As the wind patted our shoulders and arms, then it died down, and the handprints faded from the back of the car. Jill and I clung together for a moment in both terror and delight. Finally, I released her. She got in the car while I called the local garage to come